Hi, Gemini. Right from the beginning, this love reading feels incredibly intense. Like someone is finally starting to realize that if they stay silent any longer, they could actually lose you for real. There are so many emotions that have been held back in this connection for far too long. Old fears, avoidance patterns, words that were never fully spoken out loud. But something is changing now, because they can feel your energy shifting. It's almost like you're slowly stepping out of that waiting space you once stayed in for them. And the thought of possibly losing you is what's finally waking this person up to the truth of how they really feel. The Judgment card and the Eight of Wands both carry this strong energy of realization. Like they're no longer able to pretend this connection doesn't matter to them anymore. And the question is, why did it take the feeling of you pulling away for them to finally understand how much you truly mean to them? Because honestly, it feels like this person has been living in hesitation for far too long. They thought they still had time. They thought this connection would always be there, that you would keep being patient the way you always had before. But then, something started changing. Maybe it was the way you became quieter, the way you stopped trying to explain everything. Or maybe it was simply the feeling that your energy was no longer standing still in the same place. And that's what scared them. The Judgment card feels less like some loud emotional explosion, and more like a very personal awakening, the kind that happens during an ordinary moment, maybe while they were driving alone, or staring at their phone at 4 a.m, not knowing what to say, or during that strange moment when they realized conversations between the two of you just didn't feel the same anymore. This person has so much left unsaid, so many messages written out and deleted, so many moments where they wanted to reach out, only to convince themselves to stay silent again. And honestly, I think what exhausts them the most is that they can't fully tell the difference anymore between logic and real emotion. Because the more they try to analyze this connection, the more they realize it doesn't feel like anything they've experienced before. The Ace of Cups carries such a deep energy here. Soft, quiet, but very real. This no longer feels like a passing curiosity, or the kind of attraction that fades after a few days. Something inside of them is slowly opening up. And I keep feeling like this person has spent a long time trying to keep everything safe, trying to act normal, trying to talk like nothing was happening, trying to keep this connection light enough that they wouldn't have to face what they actually felt. But the Eight of Wands brings in completely different energy. It feels like emotions that were buried for too long are finally starting to move faster. Thoughts about you keep showing up, sometimes out of nowhere. Maybe it's hearing an old song, driving past a familiar place, or seeing something random that instantly reminds them of you. And the more they try to ignore it, the more you stay on their mind. What's interesting is that this connection doesn't feel loud on the outside. It feels more like two people quietly holding a lot inside themselves. But underneath all that silence, there's so much emotional movement happening. Gemini energy in this reading feels deeply tied to mental connection. Almost like there's an invisible thread of thought between the two of you. And sometimes this person wonders if you can feel that too. If you somehow know they still think about you every single day. That there are nights where they reopen old conversations just to reread a few small lines. And honestly, I think this person is stuck in a very real inner conflict right now. Part of them still wants to keep their distance because they're afraid of losing control over their emotions. But another part of them doesn't want to lose you at all, because they're starting to realize this connection isn't as replaceable as they once tried to believe. There's something very specific about the way you entered their life. Not in a perfect way, but in a way that made them feel truly seen. And that scares them, especially for someone who's used to hiding behind silence or logic. I also keep picking up a very strong energy of communication wanting to happen here. A conversation, an unexpected message, or even just one simple sentence that's been carefully thought about for a very long time before being sent. Not because they suddenly became fearless, but because the fear of losing you is starting to feel bigger than the fear of rejection. And maybe for the first time in a long time, this person is beginning to understand that silence can also become the reason you lose someone you genuinely care about. But what they still don't know is, after all this time, whether your heart is still open to them or not. Because honestly, I keep feeling like this person has tried to run from this connection more than once. Not because they didn't feel it, but because they felt it too deeply. And sometimes, the connections that touch us the most are also the ones that scare us the most. The Lover's card carries such a unique energy here. This goes beyond attraction, beyond chemistry. It feels more like meeting someone you only talk to a few times. Yet somehow they stay in your mind long after the moment is over. There are people we meet and quickly forget. And then there are people who barely have to do anything at all, and somehow their energy just lingers. And honestly, I feel like you became that kind of person in their life. Maybe they tried staying busier, tried talking to other people, tried distracting themselves with work, friends, or everything happening around them. But during the quietest, most ordinary moments, their thoughts always drift back to you. Standing in line for coffee in the morning, driving home after a long day, or hearing their phone buzz and instinctively hoping it might somehow be you. Gemini energy in this reading feels very tied to mental replay. This person replays everything: a look, a short sentence, a moment where the two of you laughed together. Even conversations that seemed completely normal somehow stayed with them longer than they expected. The Six of Cups carries such deep nostalgia here. It feels like this connection keeps returning to their mind at the most unexpected times. And what confuses them is that the more distance they try to create, the more they miss you. I also feel like this person tried very hard to explain this connection logically. They wanted everything to make sense, wanted clear reasons, wanted to understand why your presence affected them this deeply. But some emotions become harder to explain the more you analyze them. And honestly, the Star card feels exactly like that. You make them feel both calm and unsettled at the same time. Calm because when they're around you, they feel a little more like themselves. But unsettled because this connection takes away that familiar sense of emotional control they're used to holding on to. There's something about your energy that makes it impossible for them to keep things surface level. And I don't think they're used to that. Because this person seems like someone who normally hides emotions behind silence or behind looking completely fine on the outside. But internally, their mind never really stops moving, especially at night. When everything around them slows down, that's when their feelings about you become the clearest. I keep seeing the image of someone reopening old messages, reading a few small lines again, then sitting there quietly for a long time afterward. Not because they have nothing to say, but because there's too much they want to say all at once. And little by little, they're realizing something that's becoming harder to deny. You are not like the people they've met before. Not in some loud or obvious way, but in the kind of way where they still remember your energy, even when you're nowhere near them. And maybe you don't even realize that. Maybe you've already convinced yourself this connection faded a long time ago. But inside this person's mind, you still appear very often. Sometimes all it takes is one small moment, and suddenly the emotions they've been trying to keep hidden start shaking loose all over again. And honestly, I don't think their biggest fear anymore is whether they should admit their feelings or not. I think what scares them most now is the possibility that after all this silence, someone else may already be standing closer to your heart than they are. Or whether, after all this silence, someone else may already be standing closer to your heart than they are. Because honestly, I keep feeling like this connection has been influenced by too many outside voices. Not just the emotions between the two of you, but also opinions, conversations, assumptions coming from people around them. The Five of Wands carries such noisy energy here. It feels like this person got pulled into too many different perspectives all at once. Everybody seemed to have something to say about you. Everybody thought they understood this connection. And at some point, this person allowed those voices to shape the way they saw you. Maybe it was friends, an ex, or simply people who like involving themselves in emotions that were never theirs to begin with. And honestly, I also feel like someone made them believe this connection wasn't safe somehow, that you were too different, too hard to read, or maybe too emotionally intense to fully step into. So instead of listening to their own feelings, they started analyzing you through other people's opinions. And that's why the Seven of Swords feels so strange here. Not necessarily deception in an obvious way, but more like too many things being hidden in the dark. Someone may not have told them the full truth. Or maybe they weren't being fully honest with themselves about their own emotions back then either. I keep seeing the image of someone sitting in the middle of all these voices, while slowly losing connection with their own heart. And honestly, the sad part is, there were moments where they genuinely tried convincing themselves they should stay away from you. Not because they didn't feel this connection, but because they were afraid of how deeply it affected them. The Devil card carries very heavy inner obsession energy here. The more they tried to forget you, the more they thought about you. The more distance they created, the more aware they became of everything connected to you. But at the same time, this card also feels tied to fear. Fear of getting hurt, fear of being fully seen, or fear that if they truly stepped into this connection, their current life would have to change in ways they weren't ready for yet. And honestly, I think that's why they stayed silent for so long. Not because the feelings weren't strong enough, but because they were too strong and they didn't know how to handle them. But something is changing now, because this person is slowly starting to see you through their own emotions instead of through everyone else's stories. It feels like they've quietly observed you for a long time. The way you respond to things, the way you treat people, the way you stay calm even when misunderstood. And little by little, the image they had of you started changing. They're realizing you were never the person other people tried to paint you as. You're not fake the way they once heard, not cold the way they once assumed, and not shallow the way they tried convincing themselves you were just to make walking away easier. If anything, the more they understand you, the harder it becomes for them to look away from this connection. And honestly, I feel like this person is slowly pulling themselves away from the energies that used to confuse them. Almost like they're tired of constantly listening to what everybody else thinks. When the thing they truly want to understand now is how their own heart feels whenever they think about you. And maybe for the first time in a long time, they're finally allowing themselves to face those feelings honestly. But at the same time, another fear quietly begins showing up inside them too. The fear that while they were still caught between logic and emotion, you may have already learned how to be okay without them. And honestly, I think that thought is affecting this person more deeply than they want to admit, because it feels like they've been quietly watching you this entire time, not in an obvious way, not by directly showing up, more like silently observing from a distance. The Page of Swords carries exactly that kind of energy here. Someone trying to act completely normal, while noticing every small change in you. They notice the way your captions feel different now, the way you seem less online. Or sometimes it's simply the feeling that your energy is becoming more peaceful, without needing this connection to hold on to you anymore. And honestly, that's when the fear starts becoming real for them. I keep seeing someone picking up their phone over and over throughout the day, not always to text you, sometimes just to check if there's anything new from you at all. There are moments where they tell themselves they should move on, that maybe everything is already too late. But then they catch a glimpse of you somewhere, and suddenly, all the feelings come rushing back exactly the same. Gemini energy in this reading feels heavily tied to delayed communication. Like there are too many words sitting unfinished between the two of you. And honestly, I think this person has rehearsed that conversation in their head countless times, imagining what they would say first if they saw you again. Would they start with an apology? A simple, "How have you been?" Or pretend everything is normal at first. But the more they think about it, the more nervous they become. The Two of Wands feels like someone standing between two paths. One side wants to stay silent to protect their pride and their familiar emotional safety. The other side wants to step forward, take the risk, and finally say what they truly feel. And honestly, I don't think their biggest fear is that you're angry with them. I think their biggest fear is the possibility that you may not need them anymore. Because maybe before, they always believed this connection would wait for them, that no matter what happened, you would still somehow be there. But now, they can feel something changing in you. Not coldness, not distance meant to punish them. More like you've been learning how to reclaim your energy for yourself. And the calmer you seem, the more this person feels the urge to break the silence between the two of you. The Knight of Cups carries such soft emotional energy here, very heartfelt. And honestly, I don't see this as someone wanting to return simply because they're lonely. It feels more like someone finally realizing that there are certain connections where if you never speak your heart honestly, the regret stays with you for a very long time. And I truly feel like this person wants to talk to you, not through surface level conversations anymore, but through the kind of conversation that happens after two people have stayed silent for far too long. The kind where even a simple, "How have you been?" could bring every buried emotion rushing back to the surface again. And honestly, I think they've written 100 versions of this confession in their mind already. So many different ways of saying it, but every time they get close to reaching out, they stop and wonder if they're already too late, if you would even want to hear these feelings anymore, or if this connection has already drifted too far away. And I think that's why their energy feels both deeply emotional and incredibly cautious right now. Because for the first time, this person is no longer more afraid of their own feelings than they are of losing the chance to finally be honest with you. The King of Cups carries such emotionally mature energy here. This doesn't feel like someone acting impulsively, showing up out of nowhere just to say a few words and ease their guilt. It feels more like someone who has spent a very long time thinking about everything they kept silent before. And honestly, I keep feeling like they're getting tired of constantly trying to guess each other's feelings. Tired of conversations ending halfway. tired of pretending this connection doesn't affect them. Because some emotions, when you hold them in for too long, they slowly start turning into an empty space inside you. And honestly, this person feels like they've moved past the stage of trying to rationalize everything now. What they want has become much simpler. They want honesty. Honesty about the times they disappeared, the moments they created distance, and the feelings they never had the courage to fully name before. I also feel a very strong apology energy here too. But not in some dramatic confession kind of way. More like a very real conversation between two people who have both been carrying too much unspoken emotion for far too long. Maybe it starts softly. A simple check-in, a casual opening line. But underneath that normal conversation, there are emotions that have been quietly building for a very long time. The Justice card makes me feel like this person no longer wants to avoid this connection anymore. They're beginning to understand that if they truly want to keep something meaningful in their life, they also have to face the emotional side of themselves they used to avoid. And honestly, what's interesting here is this no longer feels like half-hearted energy. This isn't just about liking the feeling of talking to you anymore, or wanting to keep a vague connection around so they don't feel alone. It feels like this person is thinking much more seriously now about the role you hold in their life. The Ace of Pentacles carries the energy of a beginning built on something clearer, more stable, more genuine. Almost like they no longer want this connection to exist only through short conversations or late-night thoughts followed by more silence afterward. They want to know if there's still space between the two of you to begin again, but in a more mature way this time. And honestly, I also feel like this person has changed quite a bit during all this silence. Not in the sense of becoming a completely different person, but in the sense of finally understanding what actually matters to them. And I think what weighs on them the most now is realizing how long it took them to understand these feelings. Sometimes they wonder if they had just been a little more honest back then. If they hadn't let fear control so much, would this connection have unfolded differently? But honestly, I don't think they're focusing on the past as much anymore. What they think about now is whether they still have a chance to tell the truth, whether you would still want to hear the things they never said before, whether your heart still has room to soften toward this connection one more time. And honestly, I keep feeling a very strong energy of a conversation approaching, not loud, not dramatic. More like two people finally getting tired of running from their own feelings. Because after all this silence, this person is starting to realize that the longer a connection avoids honesty, the more meaningful the final confession becomes. And honestly, I don't think what makes this connection special was ever the fact that the two of you were alike. If anything, it almost feels like your differences are exactly what kept pulling you back toward each other so strongly. The Emperor and the Empress together carry such interesting energy here. Not the kind of connection where two people match perfectly in every single way. More like two people coming from completely different emotional worlds, yet somehow still understanding the deepest parts of each other. Maybe one person is naturally more logical, while the other moves through life more emotionally. One person goes quiet to process everything internally, while the other feels things immediately through intuition and emotion. And honestly, that may be exactly why this connection became more intense than either of you expected. Because sometimes, the person who affects us the most is the one who sees life completely differently than we do. And I also feel like there may have been very real distance between the two of you outside of emotions too. Different environments, different timing, different life circumstances. Or maybe you simply met each other while both of you were still trying to understand yourselves. And honestly, I think there was a time when this person saw those differences as reasons to step back. But now, they're starting to see this connection differently. The Wheel of Fortune feels like emotions returning after a long period where both people tried to ignore what they felt. Not because everything suddenly became perfect, but because something inside them has changed. I think this person is beginning to realize that some connections don't disappear just because people stop talking, no matter how much they tried staying busy, creating distance, or pretending none of this affected them anymore. Deep down, there was always a part of their feelings for you that never truly left. And honestly, what weighs on them the most now is the realization that they don't want to miss this connection again. Not in a desperate way. More like someone finally recognizing the value of something they once tried to act like didn't matter. The Two of Cups at the end of this reading carries such soft energy. Very open-hearted. It feels like after all the misunderstandings, the avoidance, and the long stretches of silence, the two of you are slowly moving closer to having the kind of conversation without games anymore. Without trying to figure out who feels more. without hiding emotions behind coldness or logic. And honestly, I don't think this connection ever needed grand gestures. Sometimes just being honest about what you truly feel can already change everything between two people. And the energy at the end of this reading feels almost like the moment right after a long storm passes. Nothing is fully clear yet. But the atmosphere feels different now, lighter, more honest, less guarded. There may still be things that take time to understand. There may still be fears that haven't fully disappeared. But at the very least, this person no longer wants to keep running from this connection anymore. Because after everything that happened, what stays with them most was never the drama, the distance, or even the silence between the two of you. It was the very rare feeling of being near someone who made their heart feel peaceful, while still making it impossible not to feel something deeply at the same time. And honestly, that may be exactly what the lovers, the Ace of Cups, the Eight of Wands, and the Two of Cups have been quietly whispering throughout this entire reading. That sometimes the connections that move us the deepest aren't the ones that begin perfectly from the start. They're the ones that force us to face our real emotions. Some people pass through our lives very quickly, but then there are others where even after long periods of silence, their energy still lingers somewhere in our heart in a way that's difficult to fully explain. And maybe the hardest part was never the feelings themselves appearing. Maybe the hardest part is whether two people can be honest enough with their own hearts to actually say those feelings out loud. Gemini energy throughout this reading feels deeply tied to emotional awakening, not loud, not dramatic. More like the moment someone finally stops running from what they feel and begins realizing that certain things, if left unsaid for too long, can become memories they carry for years afterward. But the beautiful thing here is, everything still feels open. Nobody truly knows what one conversation could change. Nobody knows exactly where two people may eventually end up. But sometimes, one honest conversation alone can already bring two people emotionally closer again in a completely different way. And honestly, it makes me wonder, have you ever had someone in your life that became harder to forget the more you tried to move on from them? The kind of person where one old song, one familiar road, or one tiny moment can suddenly bring every feeling rushing back all at once. And whatever your answer may be, thank you for sitting here with me through this reading. And if you enjoy these softer, slower, emotionally deep tarot stories, you may find yourself coming back here with me again for future readings too. And until then, I just hope your heart continues finding the kinds of connections that make you feel both deeply at peace and fully like yourself at the same time.